What happens when Hollywood royalty meets brutal honesty on live television? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Bill Maher for what was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance, only to find herself facing the most uncomfortable 20 minutes of her public life. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what happens next. Last night's episode of Real Time started innocently enough. Meghan Markle, dressed in an elegant cream blazer and looking every inch the polished media professional, settled into the guest chair with her trademark smile firmly in place. The studio audience offered warm applause as Maher shuffled his note cards with that familiar smirk that regular viewers know usually signals trouble ahead. "So Meghan, welcome to the show," Maher began, his tone deceptively casual. "I have to say, you've had quite the journey from cable actress to duchess to, well, whatever we're calling this current phase." The audience chuckled. But there was already an edge to his voice that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical celebrity softball interview Markle was expecting. Meghan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you for having me, Bill. I'm here to talk about our new initiatives with Archewell and some exciting projects coming up." Her media training was showing the practiced pivot, the corporate buzzwords, the attempt to control the narrative from the opening exchange. But Maher wasn't having it. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the expression of someone who'd already decided where this conversation was heading. "Right, Archewell. Your foundation that's going to change the world through, what exactly? Compassion? I keep reading about all these initiatives, but I'm having trouble figuring out what you actually do besides give interviews about how much good you're going to do." The studio fell noticeably quieter. Meghan shifted in her seat, her composure wavering for just a moment before that practiced smile returned. "Well, Bill, we're focused on building compassionate communities and creating systemic change through meaningful action. We've launched several programs that address issues from mental health to gender equity." "Meaningful action," Maher interrupted, his voice dripping with skepticism. "See, that's what I love about Hollywood activism. It's all about the adjectives. Everything is meaningful and impactful and transformative. But when I look at what you've actually accomplished since leaving the royal family, it seems like an awful lot of talking and not much doing." Meghan's jaw visibly tightened. "I think that's a bit unfair, Bill. We've partnered with organizations, we've raised awareness about critical issues, and we're using our platform to amplify voices that need to be heard." "Amplify voices," Maher repeated mockingly. "There's another one. Look, I get it. You married into the most famous family in the world, realized it wasn't the fairy tale you expected, and decided to cash out. That's fine. But this whole reinvention as some kind of humanitarian crusader? Come on, you're famous for being famous at this point." The audience was dead silent now, sensing the tension crackling between host and guest. Meghan's media training was being put to its ultimate test, and tiny cracks were starting to show in her polished facade. Her hands, previously folded neatly in her lap, were now gripping the arms of her chair. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation," she said, her voice still controlled but with a noticeable edge creeping in. "When you're in a position of privilege, you have a responsibility to use that platform for good. That's not cashing out, that's stepping up." Maher laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. "Stepping up? By moving to Montecito and signing Netflix deals? By doing Oprah interviews where you play the victim? Look, I'm all for people making money. This is America. But don't dress it up as some noble crusade when what you're really doing is building a brand around your royal connection while simultaneously trashing the institution that made you famous in the first place." Now, the real Meghan was starting to emerge from behind the carefully constructed public persona. Her voice rose slightly, and for the first time since sitting down, she leaned forward aggressively. "That's not what happened, and you know it. The institution you're defending made my life unbearable. They refused to protect me from racist attacks in the media. They denied me help when I was struggling with my mental health, and they tried to silence me when I spoke up about it." "Oh, here we go," Maher said, rolling his eyes theatrically for the cameras. The racism card. Look, I'm sure some people said terrible things about you. Welcome to being famous, especially when you marry into the most scrutinized family on the planet. But you're telling me that the British royal family, an institution that survived world wars and scandals that would destroy most organizations, couldn't figure out how to handle mean tweets? Meghan's composure was disintegrating rapidly now. The practiced politician was being replaced by someone who was genuinely angry and felt cornered. You're trivializing genuine racism and discrimination. You're sitting there, comfortable in your position, dismissing the very real harm that was done to me and my family. Your family? Maher pounced on the opening. You mean the family you've essentially estranged yourself from? Your father, who you haven't spoken to in years? Or your husband's family, who you've spent the last few years throwing under the bus in every media appearance you can book? The studio audience was transfixed. This was no longer an interview. It was becoming a full-scale confrontation, and both participants seemed to be losing control of where it was heading. Meghan's face was flushed, her carefully styled hair beginning to look disheveled as she became more animated. That's incredibly hurtful and completely inaccurate, she shot back, her voice now clearly strained with emotion. Harry and I made the difficult decision to step back because we were being destroyed by an institution that cared more about protecting their image than protecting us. And as for my father, she paused, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. That's a private family matter that has nothing to do with this conversation. But Maher wasn't backing down. If anything, he seemed energized by her obvious distress. Private? You've made your entire life public. You've turned your family drama into a cottage industry. Books, documentaries, interviews, nothing is private when there's money to be made from it. The breaking point was approaching fast, and everyone in the studio could feel it. You know what your real problem is? Maher continued, his voice taking on that razor-sharp quality that longtime viewers recognized as the moment he stopped playing around. You can't handle being questioned. You're so used to softball interviews and friendly media coverage that the moment someone asks you to actually justify your actions, you fall apart and start talking about racism and mental health. It's like your greatest hits album of excuses. Meghan's eyes flashed dangerously. The polished Duchess persona was completely gone now, replaced by someone who looked like she was seriously considering walking off the set. Excuses? You think experiencing racism and having suicidal thoughts are excuses? You think being abandoned by an institution that promised to protect me is something I made up for sympathy? I think, Maher said, leaning forward with predatory intensity, that you've gotten very good at weaponizing your victim status. Every time someone criticizes your actions, you don't address the criticism. You just start talking about how hard your life has been. Well, guess what? Life is hard for everybody. Most people don't get to handle their problems by moving to a mansion in California and complaining about it on Netflix. The audience was completely silent now, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep rolling or cut to commercial. Meghan stood up abruptly from her chair, and for a moment it looked like she might actually leave right then and there. Sit down, Maher said calmly, not even looking up from his notes. We're not done here. The casual command seemed to snap something in Meghan. Instead of leaving, she sat back down hard, her composure now completely shattered. Don't you dare tell me to sit down. You invited me on this show, and I came here in good faith to have a conversation. Instead, you've spent the entire time attacking me personally and dismissing legitimate concerns about racism and institutional abuse. Legitimate concerns? Maher's voice dripped with sarcasm. Let me tell you what I think happened. I think you married a prince, expecting fairy tale treatment. And when you discovered that being a working royal actually involves work and criticism, you decided to burn the whole thing down rather than tough it out. And now you're touring the media circuit painting yourself as some kind of civil rights hero because you couldn't handle tabloid gossip. Meghan's face went completely white, then flushed red with anger. That is the most ignorant, reductive interpretation of what happened that I've ever heard. You have no idea what it was like to be the only person of color in that family, to have every aspect of my life scrutinized and twisted by a hostile media To be told that my son wouldn't receive security protection or a title because of concerns about how dark his skin might be. "Oh, come on!" Maher exploded, his own composure finally cracking. "You're going to sit there and tell me that the British royal family, the same people who made your mixed-race husband sixth in line to the throne, are secret racists? The same family that welcomed you with open arms, gave you a multi-million-dollar wedding, and made you a duchess? They're the villains in this story?" "They didn't welcome me with open arms," Meghan shot back, her voice now raised to near shouting levels. "They tolerated me as long as I stayed quiet and played by their rules. The moment I started speaking up about the treatment I was receiving, suddenly, I was the problem. Suddenly, I was too American, too outspoken, too much trouble." Maher laughed bitterly. "Too American? You mean too entitled? Look, I get it. Adjusting to a new culture is hard. But instead of adapting, you decided to change the rules. And when that didn't work, you took your ball and went home. But not before making sure everyone knew it was all their fault." The confrontation was spiraling completely out of control now. Meghan was visibly shaking with anger, her hands clenched into fists. "You don't know what you're talking about. You sit here in your comfortable little bubble, making jokes about serious issues, thinking you understand complex situations that you've never experienced. You've never been the only person who looks like you in a room full of people who see you as an outsider." "Right, because I'm just some privileged white guy who doesn't understand struggle," Maher fired back. "Except I've been in this business for 30 years. I've faced plenty of criticism and controversy, and somehow I managed to build a career without blaming everyone else for my problems. The difference between us is that when people attack me, I attack back with better material, not victim narratives." "This isn't about your career," Meghan was practically screaming now. "This is about a woman who was driven to the point of considering suicide by institutional racism and media harassment, and you're sitting there making jokes about it like it's some kind of publicity stunt." The mention of suicide seemed to give Maher pause for just a moment, but he quickly recovered. "You know what? Fine. Let's talk about that suicide comment you made to Oprah. Because that was a hell of a thing to drop in the middle of a primetime interview. But here's what I don't understand. If you were really in that dark a place, why didn't you get help? Why didn't you check yourself into a facility? Why did the solution have to be leaving the country and starting a media war with your in-laws?" Meghan stared at him in absolute disbelief. "Are you seriously asking me why I didn't just quietly disappear into a mental health facility instead of speaking out about the system that was destroying me? Do you hear yourself right now? I'm asking why your solution to personal problems had to involve destroying other people's lives and institutions. Harry's relationship with his family is probably permanently damaged because of the choices you two made. Was your comfort really worth that?" That was the final straw. Meghan stood up again, this time clearly with no intention of sitting back down. Her face was a mask of fury and disbelief. "My comfort? You think this was about my comfort? I was trying to survive, and my husband was trying to protect his wife and child from the same system that failed to protect his mother. But apparently asking for basic human decency and protection from racist attacks is too much to ask." The studio was in complete chaos now, with producers frantically signaling from the wings and audience members looking like they wished they were anywhere else. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television, into something genuinely ugly and painful to watch. But Maher wasn't done. He seemed almost possessed by his need to land one final blow. "You want to talk about Harry's mother?" Maher's voice turned ice cold, and even he seemed to realize he was about to cross a line that probably shouldn't be crossed. "Diana died in a car crash running from paparazzi, which was tragic. But you know what she didn't do? She didn't spend her final years doing tell-all interviews trashing the royal family and airing their private business to the highest bidder. She maintained some dignity even when her marriage fell apart." The studio went dead silent. Even the camera operators stopped moving. Meghan's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, and then pure, undiluted rage. For a moment, she looked like she might actually physically attack him. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "How dare you use that woman's death to score points against me? She was Harry's mother, and you have no right to weaponize her memory to attack his wife. But Maher was in full attack mode now, seemingly unable to stop himself. I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm pointing out that there's a difference between being a victim of circumstances and playing the victim for profit. Diana was actually trapped in that system with no way out. You had choices, you had options, and you chose to burn bridges and cash checks. You are unbelievable, Meghan said, her voice now deadly quiet in a way that was somehow more frightening than when she was shouting. You think you're so clever, so insightful, sitting there tearing people down for entertainment, but you're just a bitter, cynical man who mistakes cruelty for wisdom. And you're just another Hollywood narcissist who thinks the world owes you something because you had a rough couple of years. Maher shot back. The difference is, I'm honest about what I am. You're still pretending to be some kind of humanitarian saint. Meghan looked around the studio, taking in the shocked faces of the audience. The frantic producers, the cameras still rolling to capture every moment of this disaster. When she spoke again, her voice was calm but filled with a cold fury that was more devastating than any shouting. You know what, Bill? You're absolutely right about one thing. I do have choices. And I'm choosing not to sit here for one more second and let you use me as your punching bag for cheap laughs and applause. She started gathering her purse and jacket with deliberate, controlled movements. Oh, don't do that, Maher said mockingly. Don't pull the wounded dignity routine now. You came on this show knowing exactly what kind of interview this would be. You don't get to act surprised when someone actually challenges you instead of kissing your ass. Meghan stopped moving and fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. You think this was challenging me? This wasn't journalism, Bill. This was a public execution disguised as an interview. You didn't want to have a conversation. You wanted to humiliate me on national television. If you feel humiliated, maybe that's because you can't defend your own actions when someone actually asks you to, Maher replied. But even he seemed to be losing steam now, perhaps finally realizing how badly this had gone off the rails. No, Meghan said, standing up and slinging her purse over her shoulder. I feel humiliated for you. I feel embarrassed that this is what passes for intelligent discourse in your world. Tearing down women, mocking mental health struggles, using dead people to score points. This isn't clever, Bill. It's just sad. The audience was completely silent now, many looking genuinely uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. Some were actually looking away, as if they felt guilty for being part of this spectacle. Maher, perhaps finally sensing that he had pushed things too far, tried one last time to regain control. Look, if you can't handle tough questions. Tough questions? Meghan interrupted, her voice rising again. You call that tough questions? You didn't ask me one substantive thing about my actual work, my actual initiatives, or my actual beliefs. You just spent 20 minutes trying to tear me down personally, because that's easier than engaging with ideas that might challenge your worldview. She took a step toward his desk, and for a moment Maher actually looked uncertain. You want to know what the real difference is between us, Bill? When people attack me, I try to use that pain to help other people who are going through similar struggles. When people attack you, you just attack back harder. That's not strength. That's just cruelty dressed up as honesty. Maher opened his mouth to respond, but Meghan held up her hand to stop him. I'm done, she said simply. I came here thinking I could have an adult conversation with someone I respected, despite our disagreements. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks trauma is a punchline and racism is a marketing strategy. She turned toward the audience. I'm sorry you all had to witness this. You deserve better, and frankly, so did I. With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking authoritatively on the studio floor. The cameras followed her every step, capturing the straight line of her shoulders and the determined set of her jaw. Meghan, come on, Maher called after her. But his voice lacked conviction now. He seemed to finally understand that he had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. She paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time. You know what, Bill? Harry was right about one thing. Some institutions really are toxic. And some people who claim to be champions of free speech are really just bullies with a platform. And with that devastating final word, Meghan Markle walked off the real-time set, leaving behind a stunned audience, a flustered host, and what would undoubtedly go down as one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Maher sat at his desk for a long moment, staring at the spot where she had been sitting, while the audience remained frozen in shocked silence. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath. The empty chair, the scattered note cards, and the expression on Maher's face that suggested even he knew this had gone too far. When the show finally cut to commercial, the damage was already done. In the span of 20 minutes, what should have been a standard celebrity interview had devolved into a brutal character assassination that had backfired spectacularly, leaving both participants wounded and the audience wondering what they had just witnessed. The empty chair where Meghan had been sitting seemed to say everything that needed to be said about how the evening had ended.